Hey there, Penn State fans. Bob Flounders, Johnny McGonigal, coming to you from Los Angeles, downtown Los Angeles, on Thursday. The time change is messing me up, Johnny. I was gonna say it's about lunchtime, but actually on the East Coast, most Penn State fans, it's about 2 o'clock. Thursday, we just had some Penn State availability with offensive players. We're going to hear from some defensive players later in the week. We're actually going to hear from, hopefully, some true freshmen, I think, on Saturday for the first time all year. I know we're excited about that, Johnny, but how are you doing? I know you made it here in one piece. It's never easy going across the country. How you doing? And what's on your mind today?
Yeah, Bob, never easy going cross country, and especially around the holidays. We saw all the cancellations, everything that was happening. So, fortunately, was not canceled. Didn't have my flights canceled or anything like that. A few delays, it tests your resolve though, right? It tests your character if you can get through it. And we persevere, Bob. We persevere, and we're here in LA, and very glad to be here. Got in late last night. I guess it was technically early in the morning on the East Coast. But yeah, we talked to a handful of offensive players today, talked to defensive guys tomorrow. And then, yeah, the likes of Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, Abdul Carter, Drew Aller, expected to be available to us for the first time this season on Saturday here at the Sheraton Grand Hotel in LA. We're not in the same room recording this. It makes sense, I guess, technically to do it in our respective rooms, but we are in the same hotel, and we're I'm sure going to be enjoying the hospitality suite later today. I heard you guys already did last night. I missed it.
Yeah, we don't mess around. I'm rooming with the lovely and talented Joseph Hermit. He's not in the room right now, but yeah, we got in a little bit earlier than you, and the Rose Bowl setup is pretty sweet. The Penn State players and the Utah players and coaches, they come to us, which is great. There's going to be some practice availability, very limited for a couple of days, but they're not going to show. They're not going to show, Johnny. They're not going to show very much. But yeah, it's first time in LA since it was the 2016 season, the 2017 Rose Bowl. The last time Penn State played in the Rose Bowl, one of the all-time great Rose Bowls, 52-49. It looked like the Lions were going to win it. USC caught them at the finish. Sam Darnold was just too much to overcome. But you know what, Johnny? I think there's a really good chance this game we're seeing on Monday between Utah, the Pac-12 champ, and Penn State is going to be really good. It might be a different kind of game, but it sure feels like two talented teams. And we talked to some offensive players today. Brenton Strange was not made available today, but I know we talked to some players about him. He's going to play in the Rose Bowl, Johnny, but this is going to be it for him at Penn State. Penn State has a talented tight end room, but really appreciate the growth of Brenton Strange in the entire tight end room this year, and hopefully he can go out on a good note.
Yeah, Bob, Brenton Strange announcing a couple nights ago that he'll be declaring for the NFL, which not a huge surprise after talking to him at Bowl Media Day back in State College. He was saying that he was getting second to fourth round NFL grades, the feedback from scouts. And, so look, that's really hard to turn down if you're a tight end. And he's really developed this year. We talked about that on the last podcast about how he grew as a blocker this year. He eliminated some of those drop concerns. Theo Johnson as well, coming on strong as the season has progressed and as he came back from that injury. Tyler Warren has been involved in a handful of key plays this year. So this tight end room is going to be big when you look at the Rose Bowl against a Utah defense that was likened to a Big Ten defense, to Penn State's defense, actually by Sean Clifford today when we were speaking to him. And he's really impressed with what Kyle Whittingham's team, that mentality that we talked about before, the toughness and the grit, but really just the way they play defense. They're not fun to play against. You're going back and rewatching that Pac-12 championship game. I mean, it looked like sometimes the USC wide receivers and ball carriers didn't want to be there because of the way that Utah is playing. And I think Penn State's defense acts and handles themselves and carries themselves in a similar way this year. So I'm not expecting a 52-49 game like we saw in Pasadena, a few years back, Bob. I don't know about you.
No, yeah, I think it's going to be a really even game. I think both teams, the way that they play, the way that they prepare, I think that both, this game, there's been a couple players, opt out and get ready for the NFL draft, but largely you're going to see the core of both teams going at this. Penn State is looking for a win, really a signature win this year to close and get to 11 wins after a 7-6 year. And Utah played a tough schedule. They beat USC twice, hung in there against Oregon, UCLA, and Florida. Could have easily won, I think, all three of those games. They are a tough team. They've always been a tough team. I think it's a fantastic matchup. I think it could end up being maybe the most competitive, the most even bowl game. And my sense, we're going to make our picks, I know, later in this podcast, Johnny, but my sense is this is really a different Penn State team than the one that just kind of, I don't want to say went through the motions in the Outback Bowl last year, but a lot of players had opted out. They were hurt. They were a little bit beat up. Key players did not play. It wasn't exactly an upper tier bowl game. They gave it their best shot for about a half, but they were just trampled in the second half of that game. This feels like a different team, a different mindset. I think Utah feels the same way. I think all signs point to this being a game that is very competitive. And I just think that, there were so many big plays in the 2016 Rose Bowl between, USC and Penn State. This could be a game where there's points on the board, but I think that the way that both defenses play and the way that both offenses can run the ball, I think both teams are going to have to work for their points.
Yeah, and what you mentioned about last year, the mentality and the approach to the Outback Bowl, maybe there was a little bit of malaise, around that game and in the preparation for it. It's not. I'm not a bowl games other than the playoff and see if New Year's Six don't matter guy, because we just have to look back and see what we just saw in the Holiday Bowl between Oregon and UNC, and then the game between Kansas and Arkansas was insane. Like, I love bowl season. I know a lot of other people do. The Rose Bowl is different than the Outback Bowl.
Yeah.
To the players, to the fans, to the programs that are competing in it. And when we were talking to Jair Brown back in State College a few weeks ago about why he was explaining why there haven't been many opt-outs. There's really only one opt-out on this Penn State team, and that's Joey Porter Jr. after coming back from appendicitis, missing a couple games, playing senior day against Michigan State. Parker Washington, announced that he's not playing, but we already knew he wasn't playing with his injury. Guys like Juice Scruggs and Brenton Strange, who declare for the draft, are playing in this game. It matters to these guys. It matters to this program that coming off of back-to-back disappointing seasons, to be able to get to 10 wins this year. They came pretty close to beating Ohio State. The Michigan game was not a contest, but or at least it wasn't after halftime. But this game matters. This game matters a lot to a team that not only has a lot of seniors who've been around for the COVID year and been through a lot of struggle, but a team that is backed and bolstered by this freshman class that, you're looking ahead to the 2023 season and even beyond that, and what Penn State hopes to accomplish. You have a 12-team playoff coming up in 2024. This is a team that could compete for that. And, we talked to Theo Johnson today. He hopes to be, he hopes Penn State and believes Penn State can be one of the top teams in the country next year. This game matters as a springboard into that. And so I just think you get the sense from these guys that they're excited to be out here. They're excited to, have the camaraderie and hang out in LA and be at Disneyland. Like, that stuff is cool and fun. But when practice starts today, they're going to turn it on. They've been doing skellies and stuff like that. But this game matters a lot to these players, to this team, this program, this coaching staff. And so I think you're going to see that on Monday.
Yeah. We had a chance to talk to Mike Yursich today, and I think it was 5 or 6 offensive players. The quarterback, Sean Clifford, 2 tight ends, Tyler Warren, Theo Johnson, wideout, Mitchell Tinsley, offensive lineman, Juice Scruggs. I might be missing somebody. Am I missing somebody, or was that the entire group?
Your Wi-Fi cut out there for like a split second, so I didn't catch you rattling off the names. But yeah, Clifford, Tinsley, Scruggs, Theo, Yursich as well. I think Tyler Warren was in there too.
Yeah. So a pretty good representation. Talking to Juice Scruggs, he was asked about the 2023 team. And he praised the offensive line and the young talent, but he said, I'm going to call it right now. This Penn State's going to be a playoff team in 2023. Juice is not one to make bold predictions. I think that speaks volumes about how good he feels about this team, though.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have every right to feel good going into the 2023 campaign. It feels weird to be talking about that right now, but in a few days it will be 2023. And a lot of times, coaches treat bowl season as a prep for next year. That's not necessarily the case with this team because they really want to win this game. And for a team that has only played two ranked teams this year and they lost both games,
Yeah.
to get a win over number 8 Utah would be a nice feather in the cap of this team. And we were talking to Kirk Herbstreit, a few of us in the
Yeah.
media earlier in the week about Penn State, about this Rose Bowl, and he was even saying, "Hey, this is an opportunity for Penn State to raise some eyebrows about who they were this year and prove to the country that they weren't just a team that really beat up on bad teams and lost to the two really good teams they played." So it matters in that regard. But this is a team that has the foundation for a run in 2023. And like I mentioned, a 12-team playoff in 2024. Theo Johnson could be a part of that. He didn't specify today whether or not he's going to be declaring for the NFL draft or not. I'm sure that's a decision and an announcement that at this point would come after the Rose Bowl. But if you have him back, you obviously have Singleton, Allen, key pieces on the offensive line. We know Olu Fashanu is coming back and Drew Shelton getting a lot of experience. And Landon Tengwall was playing really well before he got hurt this year. So you have a lot on the offensive line. You got a lot in the backfield. And then it just comes down to, hey, is Drew Aller going to be the guy? And not the guy like the starter, but the guy, coming in his first year as a starter. And so, sure, you'll see some growing pains there, as you often do with first-year starters. But from everything that we talk to these players and coaches about with Drew and how he's handled himself really over the last couple months and growing into the offense and into his own skin as a leader and as a contributor in this locker room and on the team, you feel really good about where this program is heading forward. And if they're able to go out and get a win over Utah, you would feel that train really going, the hype train leaving the station.
Yeah, Johnny, I agree. This is going to be the conclusion of James Franklin's 9th season at Penn State. Hard to believe. 2023 will be his 10th season, and just the magnitude of this game. Penn State has won some bowl games during James Franklin's time, but if they would win this game, this would be one of his best wins. Definitely his best bowl win. They won the Pinstripe Bowl in 2014. They didn't get the job done in the 2016 Rose Bowl. 2017, they go to the Fiesta Bowl. They beat a Washington team that, they really were kind of supposed to beat. I think they were clearly better. They had a great year in 2019, but didn't really get the payoff at the end. They go to the Cotton Bowl, but they played Memphis, a Memphis team that was just outgunned, trampled on the road. To beat Utah, a team that beat USC twice, best team in the Pac-12, to beat a team like that, that is absolutely a signature win. It's absolutely a springboard for a young team to have even more confidence heading in to the 2023 offseason. You mentioned some of the positions and some of the players. They're going to have to add some players, I think, even after signing day and even after some of these kids come off red shirts. And it's going to come via the transfer portal. They were busy in the transfer portal earlier this week, Johnny, but I do think they are definitely looking probably to add a wideout and an offensive lineman. Penn State fans could be on the lookout for that. So stay tuned. But Penn State was busy, Johnny, and they did add a defensive player in the transfer portal, and it's a former North Carolina Tar Heel.
Yeah, Storm Duck. First of all, one of the best names in college football. And there was some weird symmetry where Storm Duck commits to Penn State. We're recording this on Thursday, so on Wednesday. And then hours later, the Oregon Ducks beat North Carolina, his old team, in a bowl game. It was just Duck season on Wednesday, I guess. But in classic transfer portal fashion, Bob, this happened while you were already in the air to LA. I was literally walking onto my plane to board and leave. And so we, texted Dustin Hawkins-Smith to say, hey, can you take care of this? Because, it's just that, it's bowls, it's transfer portal season. It's how it happens. But yeah, this was a big addition for Penn State to be able to, bring in Storm Duck. He was an all ACC kind of player, hurt by injuries in 2020 and 2021, but covering the ACC for the last 3 years, for the Post Gazette with Pitt, seeing him perform, he's a really good player, and he's one that. He's not necessarily Joey Porter. Not a lot of guys are, but when you lose a player like that, and you already have Kalen King coming back, and who's going to assert himself as the top corner in the room, arguably one of the top corners in the country this year, and so you have Kalen King already. You're confident in Johnny Dixon, a transfer in from South Carolina. What you've seen out of him so far this year, and we talked before about Cam Miller, a true freshman who's played a lot of snaps for them this year. But Storm Duck brings a lot of experience to this room, and really a lot of experience to the secondary that's going to lose some in Joey Porter Jr. and Jair Brown at safety. So a big addition, but they definitely have some spots they want to fill. Wide receiver, one or two guys. They've been all over wide receiver in the portal, offering guys across the country. They'd love to bring in one or two, at least one, preferably two, and then maybe an offensive tackle as well.
Yeah, Johnny, I'm convinced that the month of December, when it comes to the transfer portal, opt-outs, declarations, it's like being in Las Vegas. If you've ever been to Las Vegas, Penn State fans, anything could happen at any hour. Every hour is kind of like the same. There's really no such thing as off time if you're vacationing in Las Vegas and you're at the casinos. It's kind of like being a Penn State football fan or a Penn State football reporter, because there's at no point is there like a time where you say, boy, it's been really quiet the last couple hours. Nothing's probably going to happen. The minute you start to think that, they can literally add or lose a player. I mean, these decisions, these additions, these defections, they're coming at all times of day. There's really no rhyme or reason to it. It's exciting, but it's really, really hard. Penn State wants to add more players, but it's hard to see when the next big announcement, good or bad, is coming. I think as we get closer to the Rose Bowl, you'd like to think there'd be no news, maybe on game day or Rose Bowl Eve. But I could promise you, though, right after the Rose Bowl, there's going to be some movement, and we'll probably be traveling as it happens. So hopefully, Dustin Hawkinsmith will have us covered. I think even January is going to be very exciting. I think for Penn State's football program. But let's get back to the Rose Bowl and just talk a little bit about maybe our thoughts going into the game. Utah is Penn State opened as a very slight favorite, and then the money shifted, and now Utah is a slight favorite, about 2 points, maybe 2.5, depending on where you're looking. The total's around 52. I think the weather's going to be around 60. There's a little bit of a chance of rain. I don't really think that matters the way that these two teams play. I think the conditions could be worse. They could be playing the game in State College, like it was last week when it was about 10 degrees. I think the weather's going to be good. I think it's going to be both teams are going to give it their best shot. I'm just curious what you think maybe a couple of storylines you're going to follow, and maybe a couple of players that you think could have a huge outcome in this game.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing really for Penn State's offense throughout this season, and you wrote about this today, Bob, so give that a read, Penn State fans, but the running game and what they've been able to do on the ground. It was so anemic last year. They really weren't able to get anything going. It felt like really since the 2019 season with Journey Brown that they hadn't had that pop, that drive in the ground game. They've had that with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen this year, and Kevon Lee being sidelined has really almost allowed those two freshmen to blossom into two of the top running backs in the Big Ten and in the country. And now they're going up against Utah, which is the top run defense in the Pac-12. Now, Penn State fans might sit here and say, oh, the Pac-12 is not the Big Ten. And, how much does that matter? Well, it does matter when you're facing a Kyle Whittingham team and a program that has kind of built itself on this formula. And now Utah on an offensive end has been throwing the ball a whole lot more this year. They've been scoring a whole lot more points. But without Dalton Kincaid, that tight end that we've talked about so much, an All-American guy, it's going to be really – I think it's going to be hard – not necessarily hard, but harder for Utah to move the ball without him. I mean, he was such a security blanket and a dynamic threat on third down, and so when you have that on the opposite end, when you have a Utah team that has to deal with losing arguably its best player and its linchpin on offense, if you're Penn State, if you're able to control the clock, control possession, run the ball well, and really finish in the red zone, which they've been really good at this year. I mean, Penn State has been one of the best red zone teams offensively and defensively in the country. I think if you can win in the red zone and run the ball well, I think you have a formula to win against this Utah team.
Yeah. Agreed 100%, Johnny. One thing I think I'll be watching for is two things that come to mind when watching Penn State. It is the health of their offensive line in a good way, and also fresh legs for their true freshmen. The offensive line, we don't know if Olu Fashanu is going to play, right? But if he does play, that is a huge addition for Penn State. If he doesn't, at least they got Drew Shelton reps down the stretch, starting reps, and I don't think there is nearly the worry, even though Utah's got a good defense, that had this been his first start, much like the way Olu started his first start in the Outback Bowl last year, there's more of a concern. We don't know about Olu, but he could play. That would be a bonus. During the season, I think it was pretty clear that Hunter Norzad and Sal Wormley were beat up down the stretch. James Franklin referenced it. I think they played hurt. They were not injured. He mentioned how he could never get Juice Scruggs out of the game because they really didn't have a backup center because, the backup center was probably Hunter Norzad. They needed him at guard. So these guys have had a month off. I think whatever was bugging them, I think they must feel a lot better. I think that bodes well. And I do believe, Johnny, that a couple of Penn State's true freshmen, I think it's realistic to expect the amount of time that they played, they could have hit the freshman wall even a little bit in November, despite the fact that Penn State went 4-0. I think that you're going to see Nick Singleton and Katron Allen feeling pretty good after a month off. Not that they weren't good in November, but I think they're going to be feeling even better. And also a guy like Abdul Carter, who played a lot of football for Penn State. I know Manny Diaz played a lot of players, but I think when you're a true freshman, you're just not ready for that kind of work your first year. I think the time off is really going to help those players and some other players. But I'm just looking at that offensive line and thinking they were able to run the ball. They did finish strong. They made some plays against Ohio State. They made some plays against the good Auburn defense, and now they've had some time off. I expect a refreshed Penn State offense, and I think that really could show up. And the other side of that is Utah really didn't get a break, right? They played 13 games. They had a great win over USC the second time around, but I don't know if they're as fresh as Penn State, and I'm curious to see what that might look like on Monday.
Yeah, and another area that I'm really looking forward to seeing how everything plays out is in the secondary of both of these teams.
Yeah.
You mentioned Joey Porter Jr. opting out, not going to be a part of this game. Storm Duck isn't flying in for the game. He has to wait to enroll and to officially sign and become a Penn Stater. On the flip side, Utah not having Clark Phillips III, who is an All-American corner with 6 interceptions this season. He had declared for the NFL and won't be playing either. So you've got 2 secondaries playing without arguably their top players, and 2 quarterbacks who have a lot of experience. Cam Rising has played well this season. Sean Clifford has been up and down. We've seen him come back and win a game at Purdue. We've seen him almost throw it away, a series or 2 before. And so I'm looking to see if a turnover or a takeaway is the tipping point in this game. If it's going to be that close and that tight of a matchup, really sometimes all it takes is one turnover to lose you a game or to win you a game. And both of these teams had 24 takeaways this year, second in the conference and in their respective conferences. Again, six of those interceptions from Clark Phillips is not going to be there. But this is one where, hey, if you're Sean Clifford, you got to take care of the ball. You really do, because and if you're Cam Rising, you got to take care of the ball because you don't want to be the reason why a pick six going the other way or a short field. And we've seen Penn State's defense really respond well to sudden change this year. But in the Rose Bowl, you don't want to have to rely on sudden change defense. You want to be able to control the clock, control the ball, and ultimately keep it away from Utah and maybe take it away once from the Utes.
Yeah, you mentioned Cam Rising. I think that's another key to the game for me. Not so much as a thrower, but as a runner. How will Penn State handle him? One of the reasons I think Utah has run the ball so well this year, 220 yards average per game, is that defenses have to account for the quarterback as a runner. I think he ran for 90 yards in the opener at Florida. He had 3 rushing touchdowns against USC in the first meeting of that game. So how will Penn State deal with that running quarterback, especially on third down? I think he can extend plays and extend drives if Penn State doesn't have a good plan for him. I'm sure that Manny Diaz is well aware that not only is this quarterback, Cam Rising, a dangerous thrower, he's a dangerous runner. I think he's a veteran. He's been around. He's seen it all, right? So I think the other thing for me, if Penn State's going to win this game, is they have to have a really good plan to stop him from affecting the game with his legs, limiting the damage he does, whether it's extending plays to get receivers open or converting maybe third downs on design runs. Will they have a good plan for him? If they can limit him, make him a little bit more one-dimensional, I think Penn State would feel pretty good about their chances. That's something I'm going to be watching on Monday.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And on that, on that point specifically, I think Abdul Carter and Jair Brown, two guys will have pretty big assignments in that regard, on third down. And let's say if it's third down and long and Penn State goes into its prowler package and Jair is closer to the line of scrimmage, I'm sure he's going to have his eyes on Cam Rising and see if he can, I'm sure Rising might want to, escape the pocket, pick up some yards. Maybe if it's a third and long, move him into field goal range, that kind of thing. It's going to be those little things. It's going to be the little things that James Franklin talked about after the Rutgers game when he was saying that Abdul Carter has made those splash plays all year, but he's been getting better and better and better at the simple assignments, the little things that make a good linebacker. And so I think some of those little things are making sure you don't miss an assignment or miss holding an edge or keeping contained. And so Cam Rising is an experienced quarterback. He'll be looking for any weakness he can find. And it's up to Penn State's defense and Manny Diaz to not give him any of those weaknesses. And I think on the flip side, too, when you talk about Penn State's offense, just one final thing for me in terms of a key. We talked to Theo Johnson today. I talked a lot with Mitchell Tinsley today, who, 1 year transfer in from Western Kentucky. He's talking about how this Rose Bowl is a dream for him. I wrote about that on PennLive.com and about how his journey from walking on at a JUCO to going to Western Kentucky to coming here at Penn State. This is a dream for him, but it's also just a big opportunity for him because without Parker Washington, he is the leading receiver on this team. You've got guys like Harrison Wallace who can contribute, Liam Clifford, Amari Evans, Keandre Lambert-Smith is the other big name. But the tight ends, Theo Johnson and Brenton Strange in his final game, Tyler Warren, who, like I mentioned earlier, has made some big plays, on fourth down and in the red zone this year. It's going to be up to those tight ends and those older, guys like Tinsley to step up on third down in crunch time when Sean Clifford needs to be maybe bailed out or needs to look somewhere. Guys that got to be open. They just have to be open for him because the last thing you want is Sean Clifford throwing into like a tight window or a throw that's not there. And so I think that's really key because, when you talk about not turning the ball over, part of that is on the quarterback and part of that is on the guys getting open for him. So without Parker Washington, that'll be huge.
Yeah. All right, I'll go first. You can defer to your pick. I like I said, I think this is going to be a back and forth game. As well as Penn State was able to separate from their Final Four opponents. That would stun me if they can gain the upper hand and just kind of hold Utah off and win comfortably. They actually had some anxious moments at Rutgers. You look at the final score, Rutgers just was not able to keep up with Penn State's depth. They were impressive against Maryland and shutting them out, but they didn't. They knocked the quarterback out at Indiana, and that kind of took the air out of the Indiana's balloon there at home. So this is a different animal. This is a different challenge. And you only have to look back to 1 year ago and see what a good Utah team did to Ohio State. They scored points. They had them in all kinds of trouble. This could absolutely happen again to Penn State. Penn State's defense is going to have to tackle well. They're going to have to play really well on third down. And I think on offense, the tight ends, you said it, huge role in this game with the wide receiving core depleted. Sean Clifford's going to have to play one of his best games. There is no question. I think the running game and the fresh legs of the true freshman, it could just be one or two plays where Utah has this game in control. But if Singleton shakes loose or Katron shakes loose in a close game, it wouldn't surprise me. I'm going to go 27-20 Penn State. And I think this is a really big game for Penn State and one of the biggest games that James Franklin has really coached in, because if they can win it with the team they have coming back, boy, it really sets the stage for next season with the schedule they have. They're going to get Michigan at home. I don't want to get too far ahead, but the confidence this team will have and the young players growing into better players, it's really, I think, a key game. I think it's going to be a close game, and I think Penn State really wants this one pretty bad. It would surprise me if they lose, and I know Utah's a good team. I think Penn State's going to win. I got it 27-20.
Man, I'm looking at our predictions that we post online and everywhere. You know, I sent it in to our editors yesterday. So you have 27-20?
I do.
I have 27-21.
Yeah.
So we're going to be in the press box, you know, on Monday, and we're just going to be looking at each other when, you know, Utah lines up for an extra point to see if they can get it to 21. Now, I see it the same way. I think it's going to be a really tight game. Look back the last time Penn State was in the Rose Bowl. They had this dude named Saquon Barkley, and he put up 194 yards, and a lot of it came on that one dazzling run that everyone looks back on. But 194 rushing yards. I don't think you're going to see that individually from Nick Singleton or Katron Allen, but I wouldn't be surprised if they combine for it, because I do think all year when they've gotten into a rhythm in the running game, those two guys are just so difficult to stop when they get going. You know, the different styles and the different abilities that they bring. We saw Nick Singleton be a home run threat earlier in the year, but he's grown into a more well-rounded runner, a guy who was willing and able to lower his shoulder and fight for those extra yards. Meanwhile, Katron Allen, we saw that power early on, but I think you've seen throughout the season his finesse and his vision really come to the fore when it comes to finding the open hole and just hitting it and going. Now, Utah's defense is stouter than Rutgers and Maryland and Indiana for sure. But I think that once those two guys get going, and I think they will, I just think Penn State's going to be able to control this game. And you know, yes, I think the score itself is going to be close, but I expect Penn State to win this and to cover and all those kind of good things. But I think this game means a lot to these players, means a lot to this program. Not saying it doesn't mean anything to Utah, because they were just here last year and they lost a thriller to Ohio State. And I'm sure they would love to win this game, but you know, think back to when Penn State won the Big Ten title and came out to the Rose Bowl. I think Utah was pretty satisfied with winning the the Pac-12. This is a big win and a big game for Penn State moving into 2023. I got the Nittany Lions 27-21. I've got Utah scoring one more point than you do, Bob.
One final thing before we go here on this Blue White Breakdown podcast, and it's important, Penn State fans. I want you to listen to me, and I want you to listen to what Johnny's going to say. I want you guys to be on the lookout on PennLive. We keep mentioning the 2016 Rose Bowl and what Penn State did in James Franklin's third season. It was really a huge season in the history of James Franklin's coaching development. It was a huge season for Penn State. They had not been very good in 14 and 15. They started a little slow in 2016, but man, that was a special team. That was a special game. There were a lot of special players on that team who have gone on to do great things, but that team was really transformative, I think, for James Franklin and I think for the future of Penn State's program. Johnny, you have had a chance kind of to take a look back at the significance of that 2016 team, the significance of that Rose Bowl, what it meant to Penn State in 2016, but also what it meant, you know, in future years in terms of players, I think, wanting to come to Penn State to be a part of James Franklin's program. You have a big story, I think, coming up about the season, about the significance of it. I know you've talked to some former Penn State greats and some former Penn State coaches. I know you're excited to write it, and I just wanted to alert our listeners and our viewers to look for that on PennLive. It'll be in the paper, I believe, on January 1st, and tentatively our plan is to schedule it. I think it should be on PennLive, I think, on Saturday morning, but if not, it'll be up before the game. It's going to be a great read. I know you had a fun time talking to some of these people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the plug there, Bob. No, it's a lot of good conversations, you know, over the last week or so, even dipping into the week before. Talked to Trace McSorley. Joe Moorhead called me from Florida on Christmas Eve when he was with his family. He escaped the blizzard in Ohio to go down to Orlando, spend some time. And so I was able to talk to him, Mike Gesicki, Brandon Bell, some key players and figures on that team. And a year or two that, was just kind of a launching point for this program in year 3 under James Franklin, a couple of so-so seasons, a year that, they get trampled by Michigan. They lose a close one to Pitt, but, a corner was turned against Minnesota. You have the block kick against Ohio State. You win the Big Ten title. And then they came out to LA here, and yeah, they lost, but it was a thriller. It's a classic. It's a game that those players still look back on fondly, and it's an experience that they look back on fondly as a week and a game that capped a really special season for that team and for that program, and James Franklin and everyone involved. So yeah, looking forward to writing it. Right after we finish recording here, once we hit end, I'll head to the media workroom and work on that. So yeah, keep an eye out for that, and look forward to sharing all those stories with you guys.
No pressure at all on you, Johnny. No pressure at all. I just
hyped it up like crazy.
I put you on the hot seat. I didn't mean to. I just realized, like, boy, why did I just do that to Johnny? But I do know that you had such fun talking to these people. I have no doubt it's going to be a great story. But yeah, I know you got some work left to do on it. But hey, look, that's what comes with being at PennLive, right? The challenge, accepting the challenge, thriving in the moment, teeing you up and you delivering. I can't wait to read it. I know the Penn State fans can't wait to read it. So to all the Penn State fans, I know you're going to enjoy the Rose Bowl. Johnny and I will be talking about it via video, I think, right after it on the field. We're excited for the game. I know you guys are, but enjoy the weekend, enjoy all the playoffs, and we will talk to you after the Rose Bowl.